Well, thanks so much for coming. I have my presentation, which is just all about me, all the things I've done. But I know that the subject is sort of about making these things, finding time, finding the motivation to make them. So I can blab endlessly about comics, and so this will be one long rant. And but feel free, of course, to interrupt me and or if there's anything in particular. These are most of the books that I've made. You know, the motivation for these long kind of books, long projects, animated movies, I feel like the slow accumulation of pages gives my life meaning, gives it purpose. And that if I get things can be going bad in my life, but if I have the 2 pages that are inked that day, that was a good day. And the practice of the pages, the stack of pages accumulating on the desk table is incredibly gratifying and wonderful. And it's almost like a delusion that these pages, not almost, it's a delusional state that the pages are meaningful, or it gives my life meaning. And I've found that those accumulation of pages and being inside of the story to be more gratifying than, the books coming out or all of the other kinds of things that happen around making comics. And finding the time and slash money to make comics are all of the classic things that are like live inexpensively, move to some place where there's a cheap rent. All of this kind of stuff that I feel like teachers maybe didn't talk about in cartooning schools, but I mean, if you're smart, you know that what those kind of decisions are more important than what pencil you use or the scale that you draw. Um, do you have a job that gives you free time? All of these kinds of things. Are you around people who are encouraging? Blah, blah, blah. This book I did right out after graduating college. I moved down. I went to SVA and then I moved down right to Richmond. I lived in the Fan, and this was 2000. When did I grad? 2005. I started working on this book. I worked as a figure drawing model at BCU. I posed nude. Maybe some of you saw me nude. I don't know. I did that for while drawing this book. My rent was like, in my memory, it was $200 a month in the Fan. I don't know if that's possible, but that's what my memory of it was. And I had done lots of comics before that were kind of loving comics, and this one felt different because the goal was character scenes, decompressed characters. It's about a family on a beach house in one weekend. So it's one location, a weekend. So I'm limiting the kind of playing field like a play, one setting, these sets of characters. And the goal was to have decompressed scenes with those characters. The first scene in the book is a long dinner table scene where there's 5 people talking at once, and it's where the eldest couple, the grandparents, announce their divorce. So then the rest of the book, which is the weekend, is kind of the aftermath of these people who are in their 80s saying that they don't want to be together anymore, and the children and grandchildren reacting to that. So the idea was that it would feel like an autobiographical comic, but be from too many different characters' point of view to actually be autobiographical. But that was the effect I was going for. And I later did a book called Blurry that also I was trying to do a similar thing. Um, maybe in the 90s, there were alternative comics were mostly autobio comics, and I loved them, and I loved that direct feeling, but I was trying to steal that feeling and put it into fictional characters. So ideally, part of the joy of the book is that it doesn't, it'll be from one character's point of view, and then and then it'll also somehow simultaneously feel like it's from a different character's point of view. Then also, I think living in Richmond, it's a little hazy to remember, I started this web comic called BodyWorld. And the goal for this one was to communicate what telepathy would be like if it actually worked. And meaning I had seen telepathy and comics and cartoons, and I never liked how it was expressed. It always was like someone has a monologue in their head that's like a radio play, and someone else could tune their little radio station into that person's monologue and hear their thoughts, their unfiltered thoughts. I thought if telepathy would actually work, then it would be like my arm knows what it's like to be your arm. It would be a modular experience. And also people don't think in full sentences. It would be a flurry. Like if you like, and you wouldn't necessarily know that you're reading it from that person's body. So if someone had to go to the bathroom, I would feel like I had to go to the bathroom. I wouldn't know that I'm understanding that that person has to go to the bathroom. I just think I would have to go to the bathroom if I was under this telepathic power. Anyway, I had all these ideas about how telepathy would work, and I kind of structured the story around communicating those different levels of telepathy. And I serialized it on my website as one long scroll. This was before Tumblr, so I'm an old guy. And it was web comics then where, you know, there's Perry Bible Fellowship, but it didn't seem like there was something like this. And that was kind of part of the goal of it. And also that I could do color and I could do all of these things that I couldn't do on self-published or even published by other people comics at that time in my life. So then when it was printed in this annoying to hold vertical format that has a top and bottom page instead of a left and right page. And the maps where the story takes place that were tabs on the computer screen were these fold out maps in the book here that could coexist or be seen at the same time. Part of it was I feel like part of the mission was, what if a book was like this? You know, is a book allowed to be like this? So that fun of it, that some people found annoying in this particular instance, because it is a little difficult to hold, was still somehow part of the motivation of making these things. What if a book was like this? In the animated movies that I've done, I like that too. I feel like part of the feeling is, oh, I didn't know a movie could be like this. They're playing this in the theater. That's not a movie. Like they couldn't play some messed up cartoon like this in a theater. That's not right. You know, a book like this, that's allowed to be in a bookstore. No one told me. You know, that feeling is exciting to me. This was so this comic I later made as an animated movie. The goal of making animations also, I know this all dates me, but the GIF function in Photoshop, that I think I saw that in college or right after college, and YouTube was kind of new and Flash animation was kind of new, but the GIF function in Photoshop meant you could scan drawings and it would upload it, and then you could hit play and you could say 12 frames per second play. And so you could make short GIFs, and they didn't have to, because those kind of early YouTube things, I liked it that they were made by one person, but I liked Speed Racer. I like hand done cartoons. And so the GIF function in Photoshop was like, okay, you can make animated things that are hand drawn if you just use a scanner instead of a photography light stand. So I had done a series for IFC in 2009 and blah, 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 did all of these things that then eventually resulted in this My Entire High School Sinking into the Sea movie. And the whole story and everything around this one was kind of built around what was possible with very limited means. Again, kind of like that Bottomless Belly Button book of one location in a weekend. I knew other people did end up helping on the movie, but it's about a school that's slowly sinking into the ocean. And I thought, I can paint these school backgrounds. When they're not the school backgrounds, there'll be these kind of abstract backgrounds that I know how to do. Ideally, they don't have to be known actors. I thought it would just be kids. And so it could still kind of be like, if you know the Charlie Brown cartoons, those were famously recorded by voice actors who were the kids in the director's neighborhood. So I thought it would be like that. Or if you know the Hubley cartoons, John and Faith Hubley, they got their daughter to be the voice in the cartoons. It didn't turn out to be that way because when I lived in Brooklyn, I reached out to a couple of producers who lived in the same neighborhood of me in Bed-Stuy then. One had done Tiny Furniture, Lena Dunham's first movie, and the other had done a really great horror movie called Compliance. So there were two people around my age who had figured out how to make independent movies for hardly any money. And so then we got a great cast of Reggie Watts and Jason Schwartzman and Maya Rudolph and all these people to voice those kids from their help. This was an animation art book that I did in 2009. I always include this because some people care. This was a Spider-Man comic that I drew for Marvel. They did a series called Strange Tales. I don't know if you can get rid of that top part or that has to stay there, but the top is being cut off. Can you? Oh, there you go. It's okay. The goal for the when you look at old Marvel comics, the coloring in them is so crazy because they were coloring them so quickly, and so there would be like very bold graphic choices. Someone's face will be blue when it's nighttime. So a lot of the comics coloring I was doing around this, that I thought that was exciting. So I tried to kind of push it outside of just the panel so that there would be kind of these large abstract shapes because you could read what was happening in the story from the line art. So then the color would be like the score. Just like let me see, this book I did it much farther. So like in a movie, you know what's happening from on screen, and then simultaneously there's the soundtrack. That's this huge, like a Bernard Herrmann soundtrack, like Psycho, right? Like there's Janet Leigh in the shower, and then there's ring, ring, ring. There's a loud thing that's really in your face that's happening simultaneously to the content of the scene. And the scene is the collision of these two things, the abstraction and the figuration of the scene. So the goal for these was to try to do something like that, where you could read the story, but also at the same time, there was this other thing happening parallel to the story that could be related or unrelated, or ideally some kind of unusual relation between the content and the scene. This was about one brother goes to an island to teach English at the new school where there's a amusement park under construction called Clock World, where they're recreating different time periods. So the older brother goes to teach English to the staff of this park. He cuts off contact with the family. Then the younger brother goes to find the older brother and ask him to come back home. So that's the younger brother, that's the older brother. And it takes place in the 90s. Here, the father knows about this amusement park because he is the co-editor of Park World, the quarterly journal of amusement park industry news and analysis. This was kind of, when I was a little kid, I really wanted to be an Imagineer, one of the people who, do people know what Imagineer is? Yeah, okay. That was my dream job. So amusement park maps and those kind of things kind of are the pop-up and these things I'm doing. Doctors, this one is about deceased patient or doctors who enter deceased patients' afterlives to bring them back from the dead. This one, each page is a different scene, and so I could edit it because something that I saw from the movies that I was working on was that being able to remix scenes was very, very important. Comics typically are very hard to edit. Like if you want to change one panel, there's like this weird Tetris configuration of panels that have to be rearranged to have the story go. Whereas movies are edited very fluidly, and the editing process is, oh, we have this scene at minute 20, let's try it at minute 5, and then it changes, and that happens all the time. So I was trying to think of some way to do that with comics. And the idea of making each page its own scene and then being able to rearrange things in the story as I went was my way of attempting this. Cosplayers. This was a comic. I'm not talking about motivation or determination through these things, but the motivation for this one was that you'd go to the comic store and there would be a Superman and Batman comic, and then simultaneously on the rack there would be a comic about everyday people who cosplayed as Superman or Batman. And so it would somehow be magically putting the fandom inside the same fictional world as those people, and that it would coexist. The reality would coexist with the fantasy. And so it was serialized. It was reasonably successful in that it had like a few issues. Somewhere in the middle of doing that, IDW emailed me, that publisher, and sent me a list of properties. They said, do you have any ideas for these properties? I can't remember some of the other things on the list, but they had IDW, has the Hasbro properties. And so Clue, I was excited about doing a Clue monthly comic. And so it's a murder mystery that was serialized monthly. That was really cool. It was a page rate, and I tried to draw it monthly. And it was really fun I tried to pack it with puzzles and games, and I ordered all of the old Clue boards and tried to take the things from the boards that I liked. I found that even though that was only a few months of my life doing that monthly comic series, I think about it all the time because it was like my one little glimmer of what it would be like to have been a monthly or daily newspaper comic strip artist, where you realize like, oh, like it makes you realize why a lot of those are kind of like barely humorous or barely funny. They're just lightly amusing because you're like, well, that's the joke I had. That's what I got today. That's the funniest thing I had. And it does kind of count as funny. And so that's the strip for today, and it was a great pressure. Boy, it wipes you out though. Penciling, inking, and coloring a monthly comic, insane. I kind of got this gig because I had previously done covers for my friend Tom Scioli's GoBots comic. And Tom Scioli did a great Transformers versus G.I. Joe comic that I think he did for 6 years or something crazy like that. A monthly comic for 6 years, I can't imagine. Totally killing yourself. But Transformers versus G.I. Joe was great. It was worth his sacrifice. This also, all at some point, all of my things start to feel like side quests, as they're called, some kind of strange excursion to something or other. I was raised Quaker, and I knew about this moment in history also probably because I was a Quaker in Richmond, Virginia, that there was a rift in the Quaker community about whether or not to fight in the Civil War, because Quakers were famously anti-slavery, but they were also pacifists. So a lot of Quakers did fight. And so I knew about this moment, and it seemed kind of like maybe there's some kind of book there. There were all these kind of interesting journals, Quaker arguments. I don't know if any of you know Quaker meeting, but you sit in silence and you stand up and speak out of the silence, and it's all consensus decision making inside of the meeting. There's no voting. And so this means that people deliberate for hours and hours and hours over whether or not they should, install a water fountain on the Quaker Meeting House or whatever. So I found disagreements inside the Quaker meeting very, very interesting and kind of entertaining. And so here was a giant disagreement of what the Friends would do during this war. And also what was kind of interesting about it was that Quakers at that time in the 1860s still said thee and thou, which sounds, pretentious to us now, but was actually the informal way of speaking at the time. So someone leaving their small Quaker community, not only were put in this crazy war, they also spoke in a different way than the other people, kind of like a culture shock. So the book I didn't want to stick whenever I started this book, 2019 or I don't know what, can't even remember when I started this book. This book took many years. No, I started this book in 2014. I didn't want to put 2014 thoughts into the people's heads. I was more interested in whatever they wrote down, whatever they were thinking about, rather than me guessing what they were thinking about. So I looked through all of their letters and diary entries that I had access to, and you have this weird alienation of even reading their letters, you wouldn't necessarily know what it would be like to be at them at that time. It's before Freud. They're not writing down their dreams. They're writing down their weather and what they ate and boring shit. This is an odd, my book is a result of this research. Whatever, enough about it. This one, in another crazy attempt to be able to edit comics, instead of having the pages drawn separately, I thought, I have a great idea. All of these 1860s illustrations don't have any panel borders. They all kind of float on the page. If you know John Tenniel Illustrations, the illustrator for Alice in Wonderland. So it's like a crazy way of cross-hatching to communicate space, right? So let's say you're drawing this room, the shadow. You might not get the line of the floor, but a group of lines that are my shadow will suddenly go up at the floor. So negative space is activated. And I thought this is kind of like Quaker Meeting, where the negative space, the silence, is a little extra meaningful in Quaker Meeting. That's the hope. And I think it's often the case. But the point is, there was a connection between Quaker Meeting and these 1860s illustrations. And I thought, I'll be able to edit it because I'll just draw each element separately and I'll make collages. And so I'll be able to stick in words and move things around because there'll be no panel borders. Everything will float, as you can see here. What this ended up being is tons of little scraps of little drawings in banker boxes, total insanity, staring at the thing for years, cross-hatching and not knowing how to stick it and arrange it into pages, and total bust of it resulted in this book looking in this unusual way, but I don't recommend this working method at all. It was very convoluted craziness of making arrangements and trying things over years and things not working next to each other and on and on. When I was working on that book, something that happened in my 30s that was a great thing that I recommend to people is I started applying for grants and fellowships and just trying to do that kind of thing. I hadn't done that before. And I honestly don't really know if even historically cartoonists got those things before that particular time in the last 15 years. So I got a fellowship to work on that Quaker book, and one of the other fellows there was researching comics, or not, I'm sorry, free newspapers of the 1960s. And I would look through all of those papers, kind of psychedelic newspapers, and that kind of resulted in the idea of making this movie Cryptozoo, that takes place in the late 1960s. That's about a zoo of mythological creatures. It was also inspired by, I'm sure you all know Winsor McCay, and it was kind of around when Winsor McCay, they did the big printing of it where they reprinted it in full size. So a bunch of things, a bunch of cartoonists kind of responded to these large newspaper comics. There was a Kramer Zergat thing that was huge. There was even a DC comic thing that was huge. The idea of, it was just so exciting to see these large format, you all know comics. So in looking at Winsor McCay, he had done an animated short called The Centaurs. I think it was 1910, but it has sexy half nude centaurs in a forest, and it was unfinished. And so that the fact that it was unfinished was kind of extra inspiring. Oh, what if he had finished this movie of these centaurs? What could it have been like? That led to Cryptozoo. Centaur? Well, there's some centaurs there, but there's a lot of other different mythological creatures. Is there an actual centaur world? I don't even know about that. Okay. Is Centaur World new? That's when my movie came out. I got to sue him. Well, that a mythological creature thing, it's kind of such a, there was also, so the title of the movie is Cryptozoo. I'll make this really short because it's not that interesting, but I worked on it for 5 years, and I always thought that it wasn't enough to be a title because I don't own Cryptozoo, but I would Google search Cryptozoo and stuff and nothing would show up. And then it premiered at Sundance, and something between January 2021 when it premiered and when it came out, suddenly cryptocurrency exploded. Logan Paul launched something called Cryptozoo. 3 other things kind of came out at the same time. And I was like at a checkout aisle of a grocery store, and the magazine was like Crypto and You. They're like, and I was like, what the? But I would search on. I would do like Twitter searches because I thought, but everyone just told me no. It's just a crazy title, one word. You don't need to add a word to it. Anyway, you can't predict. Blurry, this book, the idea for this book was a guy's brother is getting married. He's going to, he has to get a dress shirt for the wedding, and he can't choose between 2 very similar dress shirts. And the woman at the store tells a story about choosing between 2 very similar things. And it goes into her story, and it keeps going deeper and deeper and deeper in. And the latter half of the story is all it rippling out until he chooses which dress shirt to buy. And also with editing, I had tried the no panel thing, and that didn't work out. So now I just draw the panels separately, so I'm able to edit by cutting out a panel, putting in a panel, moving things around this way. Technically ends in 5 minutes or something. So maybe I won't read this comic. Read it? Okay. This is a short story. The title is What About Humility? My wife Megan was mangled. Our son Jackson made it out without a scratch. Sweetie, did your life flash before your eyes? Did you see Jackson in me? No, I didn't see you and Jackson at all. Ha, that's funny. Ha. I saw only my ex-boyfriend, Humility. Humility was born with the name Glenn, but he decided all names were pretentious, and his only solution was to change his legal name to Humility. All of my beautiful moments with Hume flashed before me, driving him everywhere. Humility has no car. Buying food for him. Humility has no job, no money. Chewing his food for him. Humility has no teeth. brushing his gums for him. Because he has no teeth, humility had no toothbrush. Are you crying? Of course I am. Can you call humility on my cell? My fingers are too broken. Of course. Her phone has a swipe entrance code. I know the pattern, but my hand's trembling and my tears smudge its glass surface. Eventually I get it open. His name's easy to find. I met Megan when she was recovering from a bad breakup with humility. Why? Pat, pat, there. Have you ever felt perfectly fused with another human being? No, I guess not. I'm not looking for another big relationship right now. I need to heal. I'm only interested in Netflix and chill. My medications, casual sex, nothing serious. I understand. We dated for 7 years, married, bought a house, had our child Jackson, and now at the hospital. I told you all along, this was nothing serious. Yes, you were honest with me. Ring, ring. Come on, Jackson. Let's give mom some privacy with her ex. Are you and mom splitting up? Could be. But it's not your fault. Okay. It's all my fault. Okay. I had wishful thinking that your mom loved me. Do you know what wishful thinking is? Is it like making a birthday wish? It's when you pretend how the world is instead of seeing how it actually is. At home, I want to make a present for mom. That's sweet. I want to carve it out of clay. Here's a good knife, Jackson, but be careful. A knife can really hurt someone. Die, fucker. Why? He's carving. Jackson makes a two-headed thing called Pop Mom, a fusion of Megan and me. It makes me uncomfortable. It looks like a prop from the horror movie The Thing, where a monstrous face is fused with a dog. Love you, Pop Mom. Jackson's Pop Mom piece leads me to talk the birds and the bees. Then Freud and the unconscious. I'm never great at this kind of father-son talk. So there's the conscious world, like the ground we walk on. Above ground, people are all hateful. There are arguments, divorces, cruel words, wars. But hidden deep underground, love happens. Seeds are planted, and that's where babies come from. Do you get it? I guess. Love is mostly hidden, but it's real, all right. Marriage, I know what marriage is. It's like a yin-yang, a fusion of abuser and abused. Who told you that, Mommy? Rapping Pop Mom, I realized I had felt the fusion Megan had described with humility. Sometimes you only recognize something you've experienced when you see it presented back to you in a crude, hideous form. Holy shit. Just now, Megan calls. I need us to be a family again. What about humility? He's dead. Don't move. Oh God, what happened to him? He was stabbed on the street. Jesus Christ. He was sent to this hospital. In his final moments, we expressed our love for each other. Then his heart stopped beating. He's gone. Why? He's gone forever. I have to heal. I'm in an awful place. I need people to help me recover. Netflix and chill. My medications, casual sex, nothing serious. Will you and Jackson take me back, please? Of course. I love her. It's a dark one. I read it really fast for maximum entertainment. Yeah. Anything? Please, you kind of look like you have a question.
They motivated kind of thinking about like living in the story, that's the fulfilling part rather than the final product, being able to live in it. So at the beginning, how do you kind of know when you're trying to decide between different ideas, what kind of stories you're going to want to live in for that long?
That's a great question. It has to seem like something only I would do. And it has to seem like part of it is, why would anyone do that? Those are the two requirements. I've figured it out over the years. Something only you can do, that's a classic one. That's what they tell kids in kindergarten, right? Tell the story only you would tell. And that's great. I think that's really great advice, because it's going to be specific to you. But I also think, why would someone do that? What's the point? Why? It's not what, especially these kinds of comics where it's like, they're a little funny, but they're not super funny. They're not real, they're kind of like, there's some kind of that. The fact that it's in an in-between space, I find motivating. So then when I'm working on it, it feels like, why? Why would there be a Clue comic? Who wants to buy one? What does anyone want? That mystery, I think, is why would someone color a comic like this? What's the point? Why this is, those kind of questions I find to actually fuel the engagement of making them. And if they were easily answerable, it would make it harder. to work on. That's what makes them a bit like what they call art comics, makes them more indie or arty, I think, is that element to it. So I find that part very kind of necessary. There has to be a question of sort of what would my motivation be? Why? If like making these movies are very different than comics, but when you make movies, you see, oh, I get why so many movies are horror movies, because it's like when it works. You can screen it for people, and if they're scared, you're like, okay, we pushed the button. They got scared. Or comedies, they laughed when they were supposed to laugh. It works. But if you make something where you're like, well, I don't know if that's supposed to be funny or not, or scary, or what, then that space is more interesting and I think motivating for me, because when it's okay, it's supposed to be funny. Can I get it to be funny? It's almost like it's done already or it's finished, and there's nothing to think about with it. There's mechanisms to get it to be funny, and you can play test something and kind of hash it out. But the years it takes to make these things for yourself, I don't know. It's pretty hard to. I found that it's hard to have an identifiable emotional reaction, and instead swimming in it is somehow makes it easier to work on. Yeah.
Like for their response to kind of be why, and now I have to think about the slim and confusion for a while.
Maybe, but that's also I don't know if any of you saw Cryptozoo. In the beginning, there's a scene where this couple come across a unicorn, and they're nude, and the guy is played by Michael Cera, and it feels like it's supposed to kind of be funny because it's Michael Cera's voice. It's a funny guy, and and you're watching this cartoon, but so when we would screen it for people would be like, I'm confused. This seems is this supposed to be funny? I don't get it. And I would say, well, it's okay if you kind of laugh at it. It's kind of a funny thing to see. It's funny that this thing exists, but it's maybe not. I was like okay with a laugh, but like a laugh wouldn't be bad. But it's a lot of times I think in alternative comics, usually it's sort of like, oh, this is someone's unusual perspective of the world that's slightly funny, but it's just a grayer area. So I think that's kind of a long way to say, like, I guess the audience would have the same reaction as me, which is what is, and I would like to think that it's not like playing hard to get or something, but it's more like when I'm an audience member, I like that feeling. I like it when I'm not being, because there's something condescending I feel about like someone telling you how to feel at a particular moment. And that often almost doesn't work too. Yeah, I guess that gray area is also ideal for the audience member. I don't know, you all want to call it? Yeah. The Clue one, I remember I got lots of notes on them for the first issue and then nothing for the other issues. I think because my theory, so this is not, I don't know if this is true or not, but just because the orders would be so much on the first issue and then all of the stores would gradually order less and less. So like they cared about the first issue, and I don't know how well my Clue comic, I think my Clue comic did okay for them. But the first one, I'm sure they got way more orders than the other one. And I don't remember anything being bristling at but but I also didn't walk in there like an a-hole trying to like mess with Clue. Like I liked Clue. I wanted some kid who likes Clue who walked into a comic shop. I wanted to work with them. I wasn't trying to like mess with their expectations and give them something that would mess them up. I'd never, and I did a section for the Netflix series 13 Reasons Why, and it was an animated section that was a dream scene. My memory of that is I got no notes at all for the whole thing, but that was the second season of that show. And again, this is, I don't know if this is real or not, but it was during like the LA wildfires and all of these things. And I think that the show had a million other problems that were unrelated to me. And so they were just happy that I turned in the 2 minutes that they could plug into that episode. So I don't remember any notes on that thing. I'm trying to think of other IP kinds of, I'm sure, I'm a lot of my friends who graduated SVA around the same time as me went to work on Adventure Time and Cartoon Network and do all of that. And they would tell me about, they had lots of experiences with controlling the identity of these shows and blah, blah, blah. And so I never participated in something on that scale. But I bet it was probably, even if they would complain about it, I bet it was probably fun to get a push-pull with a giant audience like that. My teacher at SVA was David Mazzucchelli, who drew Batman Year One, which was like still is one of my all-time favorite comics. And I remember once he was like, you'd be drawing something and you'd know that, it would just be a month late, like just weeks later, thousands upon thousands of people were gonna read it and respond to it. And I think that must be how those Adventure Time people felt, where they probably didn't want to look at the message boards, but I'm sure they looked at the message boards of the response. And probably the audience response was as meaningful as whoever their producer who's giving them notes. I mean, I visited Cartoon Network. I don't think the offices doesn't exist anymore. But when I visited there, I was like, is anyone over 30 here? Like it looked like a daycare to me or something like that. It didn't seem like they had an evil overlord telling them what to do. It seemed like it was like kids making their stuff, and like in a good way, but kind of like weird. Where's the parental guidance?
Sure, do you find it more like hurtful than get?
I'm trying. That's a cool question. Honestly, the book, the now publishing feels so not even just my books, but when anyone writes about any book, I am grateful. Like it just seems like things are pretty bad in terms of interest. So I didn't have that attitude when I started. Bottomless came out in 2008, and it seemed like it got a great response, and I didn't even think about it. I didn't. But now, if anyone writes about my book, I'm like, thank goodness someone gives a shit about this. Between 2008 and now, things have really changed in the publishing world. Just the number of books that are copies of books that sell, people who are interested, bookstores, everything has really shrunken. So even here's one thing, a negative review, a million times better than no review. I'll take a negative review any day. It sucks. I can't, what, great. I've done, when you've done a few things that get no reviews, then you're like, okay, when you've done things that get a lot of reviews and then things that get no reviews, you're like, I want the negative reviews, please. Anyone who cares. The film is totally different because film's like everybody has some opinion, and you could go on Letterboxd and I could read people saying terrible things about me all day if I wanted to. But why? That's just going to bum me out. It's not one good one. it's just like it's looking at those things is something that only occurs to me if I've had a few beers and it's 11 p.m. So it's like not a good thing to do, you know? So I try not to. I try to stay off of that activity. But I can't think of usually the things that people have said about books that have stuck with me are usually like a friend or someone who fun yeah, someone yeah, usually it's not a written thing. Usually someone will say something that I'll remember for years later and will affect me in some way. Hey, thanks so much for coming out and thanks everybody.